my friends are since.
Over the past few months, I've been doing a lot more analog video artwork, not just for my own channel, but also doing kind of commissions for bands, for music videos and things like that. And I thought it was probably about time that I set up a dedicated space where I could just focus on making the videos rather than having to set everything up every time. Now, one of my primary considerations with this is that I really enjoy experimenting with signal flow when it comes to analog video, and that's because if you play about with the kind of equipment you're using, combine different bits of hardware, or even something as straightforward as using a different television, you can get drastically different results and really interesting effects from a fairly simple setup. Now, I've spent a wee bit of time trying to get something that made sense so that everything was as efficient as possible and I didn't have to constantly physically change the signal flow by, taking the cables in and out. And I've come up with something that actually seems to work pretty well, and I thought I would share it with you because when I was starting out doing the analog video stuff, these were the kinds of explainers that I found really helpful, but unfortunately, there just aren't that many of them out there. So maybe if you're interested in this world of analog video stuff, then this will pique your interest or maybe give you some ideas or whatever else. But I'll talk you through my setup and then you can do with that what you will. So this here is my grand analog video battle station, and as you might be able to guess, it's actually taller than I am, and hopefully the handy shoe rack that I got to sit these TVs on actually does take the 100 kilos that it claimed, because if not, then I'll probably hear a shattering of glass and plastic at some point. However, this is where I do most of my analog video work now, and I'll give you a rundown of what's in here and what the signal flow is and stuff like that. You'll have to forgive me slightly because it's very difficult to get the exposure correct so that you can see everything but also see what's on the televisions. So bear with me, I've done my best to try and do it, and if it doesn't work then, well, I guess tough. Now the first thing you'll notice, or at least I guess something that kind of dominates the view here, is the televisions. Now I've got 4 CRT televisions up here. They're all 14 inches. The 2 at the top are kind of consumer unit televisions. These are just kind of bog standard TVs that me and my friends would have had in our bedrooms when we were kids playing, the N64 or whatever. And in actual fact, I think this one actually does belong to my friend Hagee, and this was his actual TV that he had in his bedroom when we used to hang about in high school. It's a Mitsui TV. They're both Mitsui. Hopefully Hagee will not watch this video, because if he does watch it, then he might remember that I've got this and then I'll need to replace it. But anyway, coming down here, we have a slightly more interesting TV. It has this obscenely large silver bezel, which I don't love. However, the TV itself is great and really interesting for a variety of reasons. First of all, it not only has VHS, but it also has DVD capabilities, which is really unusual. We don't tend to see both of them in a TV like this. So I suspect this must have been one that came out at the later end of kind of CRT TV technology. However, it's made by a company called Ferguson, and I've not really been able to find much on them or this model. So if anyone knows anything about Ferguson CRT TVs, that would be great. The other interesting thing about this is that it not only supports PAL, which is the European kind of video standard, but it also supports NTSC natively, and that makes it really good for analog video art, especially if you've got a mixed system using kind of circuit bent video enhancers from different regions, because then you don't have to use adapters and all that kind of thing. Now, unfortunately, the VHS player and the DVD player don't work, or maybe they do work, but unfortunately I need a remote control for that. I don't have the remote control. I bought one of these universal remote control things to try and make it work, and it does change the channel, etc., but it won't give me access to the DVD player or anything, so that's a shame. However, the reason I like this TV and the reason I keep it around is not only was it given to me by somebody to support my analog TV, endeavours, but it also has a really crisp, clear screen, and actually it's got one of the best pictures out of all of the TVs that I've got, and I find that really unusual, but you won't be able to tell on this because obviously I'm not filming it, to get the picture, it's more to show you the overall scene, if you will. But it does have a cracking picture, and I use this regularly. The only really annoying thing about the TV is that when you're using it with kind of glitchy devices, it will lose the signal at times, and when that happens, it will show you the AV kind of on-screen display, which I can't turn off, and so sometimes when it gets too glitched out, it doesn't deal with it well. Now moving over to this TV down here, this is a PVM, it's a broadcast monitor, so it's of a slightly higher spec technically than the other TVs. The nice thing about this one is that not only does it have two inputs, so it's got an input select button down here, A and B. It also allows me, if you can see on there, I can switch between PAL and NTSC on here, and this means that it doesn't ever do that annoying thing where it has the on-screen display kind of, you know, when it loses signal, it just kind of displays or doesn't, which is nice. Now the other cool thing about this is that it is a PVM, but many kind of professional video monitors are only 10 or 9 inches, but this one is 14. So yeah, it's got a nice big picture for you know, rescanning or videoing the actual screen itself. Now, why do I have 4 different televisions, you ask? Well, as I mentioned, each television does things slightly differently or will react to glitches and things differently. And so I do have these so I can see which TV might suit the effect best and then, you know, use that one. I've told you about my output devices, which are the televisions. And so I'll now tell you quickly about some of my input devices. So some of the things that I get my video sources from and then I affect. Now the first one, if you look up here in between the TVs, you'll see a wee dot, and that's actually a camera, the camera that you're looking at me on right now. And if I zoom in closer, you'll see it's a really tiny, teeny wee camera, and it's actually a car reversal camera. I've talked about this in other videos, but these cost about £3. They can be powered by 9 to 12 volt DC, and it gives you an analog composite video output, which is fast. Well, I mean, it's great. I've got a bunch of these. I think I've got 4 or 5, and I use them in a whole host of different scenarios. They're a really cheap and convenient way to get an input source into, you know, whatever you're doing. I actually take them to gigs as well when I'm doing live video stuff as a backup, because if everything else kind of falls apart, I can use this cheap wee camera to, you know, at least have something on the screen and do video feedback and stuff. So I heartily recommend them. Now, the other video sources I've got one by one. Down the bottom here, you'll see that I've got a VHS player, and this is a standard, very straightforward video player. I think that everyone that does video art or kind of glitch art should have one of these, because often you find really weird and wonderful like videos, and you don't really find terribly strange DVDs anymore, if you know what I mean, but you will find kind of bizarre VHS probably hidden away in a charity shop or something. So it's always useful to have one of these. And also sometimes the analog nature of the tape itself looks quite interesting. So I've got that in there. I haven't used that whole load yet, and part of the reason for that is because in here, this wee box is something I use all the time. Again, I've talked about this on another video, but I can't really quite get it out. But you can see here, it is a 2-port HDMI media player. And on the side, you might be able to see I've got a wee tiny USB stick in there. And basically all this is it's designed for people who want to take their old kind of dumb TV and turn it into a quote-unquote smart TV. And so you hook this up to your television, you plug in a USB stick that's got, you know, videos and music and all that kind of thing, and then you can play it directly on your TV. Now, these are amazing because they are consumer units. They're really cheap to get. This one cost about £20. It has 2 HDMI ports out. It also has an VGA port out, and it's also got an AV port out, so composite video. And this allows you to hook it up to a whole variety of different kind of video glitchy devices. And it also means that I don't have to use my laptop or a computer, which I really don't like doing when it comes to doing kind of analog video art. So that constitutes the main kind of video inputs. I do have a few others. I sometimes use like a VHS-C camera or something like that, but those are the ones that are kind of permanently wired up at the moment. Now, to come on to what is probably the more interesting side of things, I have a variety of different video glitch, kind of circuit bent video enhancer devices, and these are always the things that people are interested in. I've only got a couple of them wired up permanently, and then I've kind of got cables around where I switch between the others depending on what I'm doing and what I want. So the first one in here, hidden away in the back, is this beautiful pink and yellow device. This is an OptiGlitch, which is a circuit bent video enhancer. I think it's an Archer video enhancer. Yes, it's a video color processor that was circuit bent for me by Tachyon Plus. They are a fairly well-known circuit bender of video devices. They've done work for Gary Newman and stuff like that, and I got this fairly recently and it's actually brilliant. I had to wait quite a long time, to be honest, to get it, but it is a fantastic bit of equipment. The thing about this one is that you kind of, if you're in Europe, there are considerations to be had. Specifically, I have to run it with a step-down transformer, so the voltage in the UK, which is higher than in the US, doesn't blow up. And also, I need to use an NTSC to PAL adapter so that it can, adapt to my PAL setup. Although, as I mentioned, some of my TVs do have NTSC capabilities, but this one is one I use all the time, and that's why it's got pride of place in there. Now the other one I use all the time, which is permanently connected as well, is this thing, and this is another circuit bent video enhancer. This one's a Kramer, and it comes from Mezcalin in Germany. They make some amazing devices. This is actually the first one I got. I love this thing. I love the paintwork and everything on it. As I said, it is permanently connected, although I've just managed to knock out the power supply. It runs on PAL and it runs on standard DC input, which is great because it means I don't need to use any additional boxes. Now I do have some other units kicking about that you'll see in here. I have this thing, for example, which is the Mismatcher. This is from someone called, I believe, Freedom Enterprises. They are in Portugal, I think, and it's got a really interesting kind of approach to things in that it has this kind of patch bay setup. But I'll talk about that in another video. For now, it's not permanently wired in. It's just one of the things I have kind of kicking around to use when I need it. This one is also particularly interesting. This is the Strange Loop from Melted Electronics, I think, and it comes from Italy. It is a Raspberry Pi based kind of device, so it's digital and it takes a couple of different inputs. Again, I really like this one, but it isn't currently wired up. It's not, it's not in the permanent setup at the moment. Down here, there's a couple of other devices that I have circuit bent. This one is one that I'll have to do a video on at some point. It's a Vivanco, I think it's a 3024, very dusty video mixer, which is a whole bunch of outrageous kind of effects on here. I did this one myself. It's another one that currently is not permanently wired in. I'm waiting on some cables to put this in. And then I've got this, which again is dusty and got hair on it, but it is a color video title generator, and I've done a whole video on how I circuit bent this, so if you're interested then go have a look. Now I do have some other devices kicking around. There's some stuff in boxes underneath, and I've got a couple of other video mixers that I have circuit bent myself, but I haven't quite thought about what I'm going to do with them yet. I've just realised actually over here I do have another screen. This is my reference screen. Now this is just like a cheap, well, relatively cheap kind of external laptop screen, and I use this as a reference point for my USB media player, because when everything starts to kind of go mental on these screens up here, it's nice to have a digital screen that just shows you the menus and things like that. So that's kind of my preview screen that I use for, that kind of reference point. So that's the main kind of constituent parts of this, but there are a few other elements that you should probably be aware of. The first thing is this with the beautiful red display, and this is really the heart of the whole system. This is what means I can route things in a whole host of different ways. This is an 8x8 video matrix switcher from Kramer. Now, what is a video matrix switcher? Well, essentially this allows me to route in any of my inputs and send them to any of my outputs. So what does that actually mean in practice? Well, at the moment, if you see up here, I'll dial down the film speed so you can see. If you see up here at the moment, I currently have my USB media player on 3 of the screens playing this kind of nice jellyfish pattern. However, if I hit a button on the Kramer video matrix, it will send my face to all of the different displays at once. So I'll do that now. And there you go, very quickly I can send any or all of my inputs into my outputs. Now, this is fine if you just want to display the same thing across all of the TVs, but of course, maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you want to do something a bit more interesting. For example, have different TVs display different kind of signal flows, and that's really what I use them for a lot of the time. So to give you a really clear example of how this works in practice and why it's useful, on this screen down here I have my camera just routed straight on to that display, and on this display over here I've got the camera running through the neon widow down here, and you can see how it's very glitchy, and if I play about with the knobs on the neon widow, that means that I get the display glitching out here. Now this means I can see not only the original signal, but also what it looks like running through one particular signal flow. And then from there, I've got this TV up here configured so that the signal goes from this circuit bent device into my Edirol V4 down here, and then I can apply effects like, you know, colorization and all that kind of good stuff that you get on there. Now another TV up here, you might be wondering what's there. It's just the same signal again. Now the cool thing about this is that you can not only see what an individual signal path might look through on different televisions, but you can then change the signal path and route it through different boxes and see them simultaneously until you find an effect that you like and that you think is worth capturing. And this is all made possible thanks to this wonderful matrix switcher here. You can pick these up for about £60. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of them. This one is composite only. It doesn't have audio or anything like that, it's purely video. But you do get monsters that have got, you know, composite and audio, or you get ones that have VGA or HDMI and all that kind of thing. So these are really cool, and if you're interested in upping your kind of analog game, then this is definitely something to consider. Not least because I was considering a patch bay, for example, and after speaking to a bunch of people in the analog video community, they suggested one of these. So this is the secret weapon. Now, a final couple of things that I think are probably worth mentioning. The first one is I've got my Edirol V4 down here, which is a video mixer. Everyone will probably be familiar with one of these. These are brilliant for video mixing. However, the time-based corrector in there is pretty crap. And by that, I mean that if you're using really hardcore kind of glitches, sometimes your picture can drop out. And if you're running into one of these, it can overcompensate, and often your picture does drop out. So I really don't like using these with circuit bent devices because they don't do a good job of retaining the kind of nice glitchy aesthetic. The way I get round this is by running the pictures first through one of these, which you can't see unfortunately because it's kind of wedged in here, but this is a Videotech video mixer and it's got a built-in digital time-based corrector. So essentially what happens is I'm routing the signal out from my circuit bent devices into this time-based corrector, which is way better than the Edirol, and then that stabilizes the picture enough that it can be used on here, and then I don't get any kind of dropouts and all that. So this thing, I probably shouldn't tell you about it because it is quite hard to find, and I don't want to compete with you on eBay, but if you're having trouble with your Edirol V4 and you do want to use it after your circuit bent devices, then you do need an additional time-based corrector, so that's what that is. The other things to tell you about that might be interesting, I guess, are here I have what is called a VCC 3010 high resolution video processor and color corrector, and essentially what this is, it kind of acts as if, you know, like Lightroom, but for your video. So on here, I can adjust everything from the brightness, the contrast, the color, and then the actual color balance of the RGB channels. And this allows you to color correct your output. It also means you can do things like turn the input negative, so flip it so it looks, you know, kind of The other cool thing about this is it does act as a video switcher, so it can have 4 different inputs that you can switch between using these buttons. So you might be wondering why you would have one of these after all if you're going to glitch up the signal anyway. Well, the important thing to know about these is that any signal you feed into your circuit bent video enhancer or similar devices will react very, very differently depending on the input signal, and that includes changes to contrast, brightness, color, or clarity. And so if you run this before your circuit bent device, then if you get an effect that you quite like but it's not quite there, then you can probably dial it in using one of these easier than you can with the knobs on here. And so this thing permanently sits in between my media player and the switch. So everything from the media player runs into this, and then I'll adjust it depending on what kind of effect I want. And I highly recommend getting a color corrector if you can find them. There are more expensive versions of this. I think there's a Sony and a JVC and things, but in the UK this one is particularly cool. The final thing that is worth saying is that if you want to split a signal and send it to 2 different locations, you can get splitter cables, but you really should be using something called a video distribution amplifier. Now there is one built into this 8x8 video matrix switcher here, but you can also get cheap ones like this 4-way AV splitter, and what this does is ensures that when the signal is split, it's also amplified, so you're getting the full signal. And this might not sound all that important, and yes, you can split the signal fairly easily, but if you want to retain the full quality signal with the brightness and contrast and everything, then you definitely need some kind of distribution amplifier, and it makes a big difference actually, especially if you're going to try and split it more than twice. So that is my new dedicated analog video art workstation, and this is the place that I sit to make a lot of the kind of glitchy music videos that you'll find on my channel. If you've made it this far and you've got other questions, maybe about specific bits of gear or how things are connected or anything like that, please do ask, because that is really the only way I learned how to do any of this in the first place. There are some other resources I would recommend if you're curious and want to learn more. You should check out Yovazol's YouTube channel because it's full of great videos where he talks through his process and also his hardware setup. You should check out scanlines.xyz. It's a really friendly, helpful forum full of useful information where I've asked lots of questions. And you should also look up the Lords of Light Discord because people are in there talking about this kind of thing all the time. So for now, thanks for making it through this entire video. Hopefully that was interesting in some way. And if not, then what do I say at this point?